Welcome to another episode of the Is That So Show. Again, thank you for showing up. We have a great one as usual. We have Mr. Richard Capriola, 2 decades. He's been a licensed chemical dependency counselor. And again, he's an advocate for adolescents. He's an advocate to let people know, inform people about the detriment, the significant impact that substance abuse has on our nation, and provide assistance and guidance as to how parents and people who are invested in the youth, how we can assist in alleviating this disease called addiction from our communities. And before I bring them up, I want to list a few factoids here. Alcohol, did y'all know that alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco are substances most commonly used by adolescents? I mean, it's like, duh. Okay, yeah, we knew that. All right. So let's go with the next factoid. By 12th grade, about 2/3 of students have tried alcohol. Now, I know a lot of y'all are thinking right now, not my baby. It's your baby that's doing the alcohol. Matter of fact, it's your baby that's buying the alcohol and bringing it to the other kids. Just letting you know, that's your baby. All right, 2/3. And again, I'm trying to make light of it, but this is definitely a heavy topic. So alcohol is a depressant, and it can lead to so many other things and traumas. So many traumas occur around alcoholism, from assault to death. But yes, please, let's not choose to be ignorant. Let's not choose to pretend like our child is any different than anybody else's child. We're all equal. About half of 9th through 12th grade students reported having used marijuana. About half. Ooh, okay. Okay, there's a lot of the sticky icky going around in high school. Half? Okay. I ain't know that many people smoking weed in high school. All right, about 4 in 10, 40%. So roughly 40% of 9th through 12th graders. Again, we're talking about high school students. About 40% of high school students, 9th through 12th grade, reported having tried cigarettes. All right, it's going down, but still that's up there. That's a high percentage. Among 12th graders, close to 20% reported using prescription medicine without a prescription. And I'm gonna wait till I bring my guest on to make any comment about that. But we'll talk about the risk of substance use later, and I'll probably bring these facts back up so my guests can actually more appropriately address these. Of course, I have in my background, I've treated people with chemical dependency as well, those suffering addictions of various sorts as well. But to have someone who specialized in licensed chemical dependency for 2 decades, his experience to the extent that he would transfer that information, that knowledge into a book that could assist others. I'm definitely going to leave the bulk of the talking for him. So without further ado, I would like to bring to the stage Mr. Richard Capriola.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to the program, Harry. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
1 second, I got something for you. Oh, yeah, we applaud our people.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So welcome to the Is That So show, sir. How you feel today?
I feel great. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this topic. Yeah, as you said, I have been in the mental health and substance abuse issue for over 2 decades. Started out working at a regional mental health crisis center in central Illinois. And I noticed that a lot of the people that were coming to the crisis center from the emergency rooms had not only a mental health issue they were struggling with, but also a substance abuse issue. So I went back to the University of Illinois and obtained a degree in addiction counseling. And then was off offered a position in Menninger Clinic in Houston, Texas. Menninger Clinic is a large psychiatric hospital that serves adolescents and adults from around the world. And I was offered a position to be an addictions counselor for adolescents and adults. And I worked there for a little over a decade. And so many times I would meet with parents and I would go through their child's history of using a substance. And when I finished and gave them the diagnosis of a substance use disorder, they would look across at me and they would say something like, I had no idea this was going on. Or if they did suspect their child was using a substance, they would say, I sort of knew something was going on, but I didn't know it was this bad. And these are good parents. These are good parents doing the best job that they can. They missed the warning signs because nobody told them what to look for. So when I left Menninger, I wanted to put this resource together. It's called The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse. It runs about 100 pages because I know parents don't have a lot of time to read volumes of information. So I wanted to keep it brief, but pack into it a lot of information that hopefully parents will find to be a good resource, a knowledgeable base of information that will help them feel more confident about this topic, less afraid, and more certain that if they're confronted with this issue, they feel better prepared to deal with it.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Is that so, sir? Is that
yes,
so?
sir. That's
Okay.
so. That is so.
That is so. Oh yeah, we're gonna have a good time here. So I'm looking at some things, sir, and of course you're a humble man, you know, which is a virtue. I see it. I can sense that. I can sense that from you. But I definitely want to broach the topic of, you know, some of your triumphs, because when I, you know, doing my little research, when I read about, you know, having been having never finished high school, you know, had two long and successful professional careers despite having never finished high school and dropping out your junior year, but eventually you went back. And so can you talk about that journey and maybe some of the triumphs that maybe can help people understand your passion?
Yeah, I never went back to high school when I dropped out. I dropped out. I was done.
You're done.
Yeah,
All right.
I was just one of those kids, and I've met many of them in my counseling career with adolescents who just don't like high school for whatever reason. So I dropped out. I was working in a grocery store at the time, continued to work in the grocery store, and then went over to the community college and said, I want in. And the counselor looked at me and said, well, you really should go back and finish high school. And I said, nope, not going to happen. So he gave me a break. He said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll let you in on probation for one semester. We'll see how you do. I said, great. So I came back after the end of the semester. I showed him my grades and he said, just keep on going. And by the time what would have been my high school graduating class graduated, I'd finished 2 years of college.
Wait a second. So you dropped out and immediately went to a community college and said, let me in?
Yeah, it was. Let's see, I think I dropped out in the spring. I started in the community college the following January.
Okay.
So I worked for a little while, and then I just went over to the community college and said I wanted to get in.
Sir, I believe now is the appropriate time for me to state this, sir. George Bernard Shaw, he, and I quote him when he stated, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. Sir, you were quite unreasonable with that request.
I was very unreasonable. I'm surprised they didn't kick my butt out, but instead I had a good counselor who saw something and said, I'm going to give this kid a chance.
That is awesome, man. That is.
I'm not sure that happens these days, but you know, that was back in the 60s when maybe they were a little bit more open-minded to a young man just coming in and saying they want to go to college.
Sir, what I'll tell you is, that's an amazing story, and it speaks to your fortitude, you know, and your wherewithal when it comes down to addressing challenges in life, you know, like really choosing your own path, doing it your way. I love that song, by the way.
Yeah,
my way, you know, love that song. But I believe that that form still exists, and the opportunities, that exact opportunity exists, but just it appears differently now because things appear to be different now. But
Yeah, yeah,
that choice to be audacious, like, it's present in some form of fashion for all of us, you know.
yeah, yeah.
The stats that I spoke about from earlier, and I'm gonna jump back and forth, you know,
Sure.
because there's some other triumphs. You didn't even go further in on some of your other story and how you came about with this passion. Because I have pages I printed out, pages I printed out. I was like, what? What's going on? And I'm seeing endorsements, and of course, I'm seeing the addicted child, a parent's guide to adolescent substance abuse. And I got to say, it sounds quite interesting. And I see that it can be found in Amazon, right? On Amazon.
The book's available on Amazon. It's also available through the book's website, which is www.helptheaddictedchild.com. Helptheaddictedchild.com.
Hmm.
That website has endorsements and reviews. You can read a sample chapter. There's a link that'll take you to Amazon, where you can buy the book in either a Kindle version or in a paperback version. There's also a brief parent workbook that's available.
Hmm. Thank you for that. And so, talk to us, like, what is the guide for parents who are struggling, you know, who with an adolescent who's suffering from addictions? What is the message? How do you help this addicted child?
Well, the message is, first of all, learn as much as you can about adolescent substance abuse. Knowledge is power. So the more that you know, the less afraid of this you will be. But unfortunately, parents want to tend to shy away from this topic. They want to assume it won't happen to them. It won't happen to their kid. And that's a very dangerous approach. So it's much better, in my opinion, to be informed, learn as much as you can. And if you're placed in a situation where you discover your child is using a substance, you have the information, you have a resource like my book that will guide you through this journey. The book itself talks about the various street drugs that are out there. Most parents know about alcohol and marijuana, but they may not
Hmm.
know about some of the other street drugs that are out there.
Can
So,
you tell
so
us
there,
about some of them?
well, there's LSD. Roughly, I think 4% of high school seniors are using LSD. 3% of high school students are using cocaine. About 2% are using an oxycontin. Around 2 to 4% are using a prescription drug like Ritalin and Adderall. Parents may not know what inhalants are that tend to be used at a very young preteen age. So I wanted them to, in the book, to get a very brief overview of what's out there on these street drugs. I put a chapter in on the neuroscience. I want parents to understand that the teen brain, the adolescent brain, is a brain that's in the process of developing. And it is important to protect that child's brain. And alcohol and drugs like marijuana and other illicit drugs, they can do real damage to a child, to a child's brain. So I put a brief chapter in on neuroscience. I put a chapter in on assessments. If you're a parent, you want to know, okay, what do I do? What kind of tests do I need? What kind of assessments do I need? You need more than just an addictions assessment. That's what I was doing, but you need more than that. So I put a chapter in that guides parents in terms of what type of tests and assessments should you get done. I put in a section on what we call process disorders. Chemical disorders are the alcohol and drugs. Process disorders are behavioral disorders. Examples would be video gaming, pornography. Other examples would be eating disorders and self-injury. Eating disorders and self-injuries can sometimes accompany a child using a substance. It may be doing both. So I put a chapter in to help parents understand that. Then there is a chapter on how do I identify an evidence-based treatment program? What is a good treatment program look like? And
Mm-hmm.
what kind of questions should I ask a provider? So I put a chapter in on that. And then there's a chapter on resources that are available for parents. So I packed all of that into a very short, concise book that I hope parents can read very quickly, and walk away thinking, okay, Okay. I understand this a little better than what I did before.
If you've been out here for a minute, you said you how many shows have you been on, by the way? Can you
Uh,
tell the people how many shows you've been on?
I quit, Harry, I quit keeping count of it. I did that for a while. And then I think when I got over 100, I quit. So I probably have done close to maybe 150 interviews on this topic in the last, since it's probably been 8 or 9 months. But yeah, well over 150 of them.
So I know that you know what I mean when I say this. As I'm branching out there into this space, I'm encountering the difference between myself and industry folk who are parading around as experts, in the field,
Yeah.
but memorize just enough to sell people because they're not trying to teach anything. It's already been printed out. They're not going to teach anything, and whatever answers they have is going to come from a script. But there's a lot of industry folk that are trying to move into the mental wellness field because they see money because people are becoming aware of it. The
Yeah.
way that you just spoke and the way that you just flowed, it let me know that you're the real deal. Like I knew that you were the real deal based off of what I read already, because you're not going to deal with adolescents for over 2 decades and not care about that. I did that for 3 months and I was out. I did family. I went. I was going in homes of families, impoverished families, roughly for about 3 months, and the dynamics of the house, the disparity, hopelessness. I'm a deep empath. It was not a healthy environment for me.
Yeah.
God bless you for what you do. It just was I couldn't deal with it. And then the addictions part of it, and then the incarcerated individual who's not present, like all of these variables, and dealing with the parent to help them adopt a healthy mindset. It's really a struggle. It's really a challenge. And so I know when people are serious. Like when they come up on this stage, I know when people are serious. I know when people mean what they say and say what they mean, because that's how I move. And so you, sir, are looking rather familiar. So I'm just saying, you the real deal. I appreciate that.
Well, it is a challenge, as you so aptly put it, but it is also very rewarding. I have seen a number of children come through Menninger Clinic. They come in, they're angry, they're fighting, they don't want to be there. They're trying to negotiate with their parents out of coming into the hospital. And then I watch them over a period of weeks gradually get involved in the therapeutic process, begin to get involved in group and individual therapy, and it's really a blessing to see how they evolve and change. Now, many of them were referred to longer term residential care because they had very serious underlying mental health issues, and some of them I've heard back from, and the success stories have been really great. They've gone on, they've completed treatment. One young lady went through, completed college, graduated from college. So it is a blessing and very rewarding in a lot of cases too. It is challenging. It can
Mm-hmm.
really test you, but also it can be very rewarding as well.
Yeah, even within my own practice, substance abuse is such a challenge that I always partner with people. Even though I've treated substance abuse, and for a while I served as a substance abuse professional, doing the SAP assessments. When people fail drug tests, they had to go through the process. The return
Yeah.
to duty process. But even in that space, like the lack of willpower or desire to want to change anything. That's the reason why I don't do the assessments now, is because the motivation was to get back to work, not to develop healthy coping strategies.
Right.
And for me, I just can't deal with fake. I can't operate in that space. It's unhealthy for me. Even though that would have been a loop. If I would have stuck doing just that, I would make so much money. It is dumb. But I'm motivated by passion and not pay. And so it just couldn't fulfill me. So I dropped that license. So I don't I don't
Yeah.
I don't practice. I don't have that credential anymore. But I'm gonna ask you. Now is my questioning is changing because again I'm dealing with the real deal here. So I can be curious now in this space, so I can learn. For those that have children who have went through treatment program after treatment program after treatment program after treatment program, and now the family is in this space of hopelessness where they pretty much just allow them to move as they will. do whatever they got to do, as long as they're not dead, as long as they're not in the streets, as long as someone, they know that they're, at least they're in the house, if they're home, at least they're in the house where they know that they're safe at. So, what do you say to those parents who feel like they've exhausted every single possible resource to address their child's addiction?
Well, from the very beginning, when you first discover your child is using a substance, from that point on, uh, parents need help. Parents need resources. Parents need a support system. All too often, we focus on the kid. That becomes the emergency. That becomes the crisis. And we forget that the parent, the entire family, as you know, is affected by a child using a substance. It's not just the child, it's the entire family system is disrupted and thrown into crisis. And many times, parents dealing with this all the way from first finding out about it to going through the assessment to going through treatment, sometimes multiple times, they often neglect themselves. So, my message to parents is get a support system around yourself. Maybe it's another family friend. Maybe it's a close friend. Maybe it's a psychologist, a social worker, a counselor, somebody that can be there to be your support system. And maybe it's a mental health support group system. But parents need help and support too, because this is not a quick fix. This is not something that's going to get resolved in 1 or 2 weeks. This is going to be an ongoing process before, during, and after treatment. So you need and deserve as a parent to have a good support system built around you.
Yes. And so if they have that support, because I'm thinking about certain, I'm thinking about scenarios in my head now. If they've gone to the support systems, but the child or the adult, child or adult that's addicted to the substances, they're still in the house impacting the unit. How do you deal with that? Like, what would you suggest to a sibling in that space that may be being ignored, because of course the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the grease, right? And so
Yeah.
now the family is caving in and looking at this one individual who appears to be ill while others get neglected,
And
you know
that often is the case, sadly. All of the attention, all of the effort goes to the child that's abusing the substance. If there's substances, or if there's siblings in the family, they sort of fall by the wayside. So parents need to know the message that the entire family system is affected. The entire family system will need treatment. The message is one that I think is very clear. It's not just the child that's abusing the substance needs treatment. The entire family needs treatment. And
mm,
and I think that's the message that I would give to parents. Your family needs treatment just as much as the child who's affected by drugs.
mm, okay, yeah, I will definitely be redirecting some parents to this specific episode when it is produced, um, so that they can get these jewels, man, because you dropping them today, you drop them. So for the sibling, all right, let's say a young sibling, right, that can't escape. So what would you say to the sibling that maybe in middle or high school that can't escape the, again, I know you were to focus on the parents here, and maybe the focus still back on the parents and getting the child to speak to the parents, maybe. But what do you say to the sibling that just can't escape because they don't have any options right now but to continue to go to school in that environment?
I think the parents have to focus some attention on that sibling. I think they have to have conversations with that sibling. And by that, I don't mean the kind of conversation where we're just listening to words. Harry, we're pretty good at hearing each other's words, but we're not so good at hearing the feelings behind the words. So parents need to have the conversation with that young man or that young woman who's a sibling Listen to their feelings, listen to how they're sounding, you know, engage in in an inquisitive type of conversation. You know, if they're picking up things from that sibling that might be troublesome, so sit down with that child and do it from an inquiring point of view. I'm seeing these behaviors from you. Can you help me understand why I'm seeing them? um, and see if you can engage that sibling in a discussion as to how they're feeling about everything that's going on in the family. Now, that's probably not going to happen in the first conversation, but if you stay after it and you focus on feelings, not just words, chances are that child will open up at some point and begin to talk to you about how they're dealing with this and how they're feeling about it.
Oh.
So 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 as a parent, don't give up. Keep working at it.
Hmm. Um, thank you for that message, because again, it's the squeaky wheel is typically the one that gets the grease. And
Yeah.
so, when I think about the fact that some of us would celebrate someone coming home from prison, would have a celebration, a block party of somebody coming home from prison, but the child who's graduating, barely any family members are around to attend the graduation.
Yeah.
What we are always interpreting the world based off of our experiences and making conclusions about ourselves. What does that say about the value of an education, of maybe this being one of the few children in generations to have that achievement of graduating high school or college? How does that motivate that person? What messages does that send to that child, that doesn't have that support? I think about these things all of the time. And again, this is why that's why I had to stop that family therapy like ASAP, because I'm looking at I don't see just the individual. I see, if you're familiar with Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, I see all of the systems that interact that one child, and it breaks my heart, the dire circumstances, the challenges, the extreme challenges that some of these children will have to overcome to live happy and healthy lives as adults, because they have zero support from the family.
Well, I was very grateful when I worked at Menninger Clinic that I was part of a multidisciplinary team. We had a team that consisted of myself as an addictions counselor. We had a psychiatrist that was in charge of the team. We had a social worker assigned to the team. We had a recreational therapist assigned to the team. And, I saw time after time these social workers whose responsibility was to work with the families. I was working with the kid. The doctors were working with the kid. The family, the social worker had the responsibility of working as the primary contact with the family. And so many times that involved doing family therapy with the family. And I would watch them pull their hair out and get frustrated because it was a very challenging time. These parents are already going through a crisis, and that is a very difficult job, to be a social worker working in that environment with a family dealing with a child in crisis, and the family system becomes dysfunctional.
So yes, so there's so many different ways that addiction has impacted families. So there's intergenerational trauma. There's that, where the family unit has become accustomed to parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles all having been or currently suffering from an addiction like alcoholism or whatever. It's been normalized now. So there's trying to assist a child in that environment adapt to life, especially if they are also suffering from addictions,
Yeah.
being addicted to a substance. And then there's the family unit that then corrodes, it seems like, begins to get eaten away from it. Typically would be healthy were it not for this one individual or two individuals in a house, typically one individual in a house that's addicted to this substance, that just, they've been through treatment program after treatment program, but the family is just threw up their hands and said, well, he's not there, he or she is not on the street, he, she, they, them, they're not on the streets.
Yeah. 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 It's a real challenge for families. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So in those circumstances, you say family treatment. So would they reach out to maybe like the nearest treatment center and see if they have like addiction groups, or what would you recommend? What type of facility? Where would they reach out to these families for support?
Well, I think they could start first of all with the NAMI, the National Mental Health Alliance, that offers a lot of programs and services for families and adolescents, and tremendous support groups. And I think it's one of the best programs out there. They could also, get referrals for support groups, therapy groups from their school counselor, from their individual therapist, or not therapist, but their individual physician. So there's a lot of resources out there. I have a number of them listed in my book on resources. Many of them are national in scope, but a lot of them have local chapters. So I would begin probably by looking at mental health associations, mental health support groups within my geographical area.
Yes, thank you for that, sir. It's weird being a host and asking people questions, especially when it comes down to areas that overlap, right? And
Yeah,
so in my private practice, I actually have a page that's called Helpful Links, and it has those same resources that you spoke about and other specific things. And I even labeled it based off a title. If you have a family member suffering, or you suffer from bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders,
yeah,
complex PTSD, military combat, like there's so many resources out there. And I think that it's important to encourage families not to give up. That you have to continue to fight. I heard you say that earlier, emphasize that earlier, the importance of resilience, about enduring through this,
yeah.
and eventually if they are enduring, I'm assuming that you're encouraging them to endure so that eventually there be a breakthrough.
Yeah, my message is one of hope. We know treatment will work. It is not an easy process. It is not a quick process, but we do know that people get through and families get through this process. And there are, as you pointed out, there are tremendous resources that are available out there. I think part of the problem is families don't know about these resources. So
Mhm.
anything that we can do to give them, access to these resources so that they can follow up, I think is going to be a tremendous service and help for them.
Yes, yes. And so let me go at it at a different angle for a second here and ask your suggestion on this, because oftentimes we talk about those that need help or healing,
Yeah,
and of course, because they are the focus,
right.
healers come in to do their healing. Guide those who are guides come in to guide others, to help in guiding. What do you have to say about, are there any changes you would like to see within the mental health or substance abuse field, regarding practitioners, be it psychiatrists, psychologists, just everybody? I'm not trying to call out one profession or nothing like that. Not asking you to specify one profession, but are there any changes that you would recommend moving forward in the substance abuse field that you would like to see?
I think the biggest change I would like to see, and I think we could do this very well in the schools, is to take more of a neuroscience approach to substance abuse, to help kids stay away from drugs. Don't do drugs, it's illegal. You're not going to get anywhere. Kids don't believe that stuff.
Mhm.
It doesn't do me any good as a counselor, or it doesn't do a parent very much good to tell their kid, drugs are bad, drugs are illegal, you shouldn't do them. You're not going to get anywhere if you do. They don't believe that stuff. So what does work? Here's what works. Here's what I found works, is the neuroscience approach. Kids are interested in learning about their brain. They want to know, they're curious, they want to know how their brain works. So my approach was to not lecture them, but opened up their mind to the neuroscience. I would show them how the brain worked. I would show them different areas of the brain and what they were responsible for. This area is responsible for coordination. This one helps you see. This one helps you think. And then I would show them where marijuana attaches itself to the brain. And they could immediately see how marijuana affects different areas of the brain and how it affected them. That was very
Mm.
powerful. So this neuroscience approach captures their attention. I would start at a very young age, elementary school, by teaching kids about the brain. This is what your brain is. This is what it does. This is why it's important. This is why you need to protect it. And then as they get into junior high and high school, I would introduce, because they already know about the brain now, you've taught them about that. I would then start to introduce how do drugs affect the brain. And this is not just a one hit or miss type of thing. This is something that should begin in elementary school with educating them about the brain. And then when they get into the higher grades, junior high and high school, begin to introduce how drugs can negatively affect the brain. That will make an impact.
Look, I know you weren't doing it for the applause, but I have to say, brilliant, real, recognize real. Have you heard that phrase before, sir?
What's that?
Real, recognize real.
I haven't heard that one.
You've been around adolescents. You haven't heard the phrase real recognizes real?
I've heard a lot from adolescents, but that's not one of them they dropped on me.
Okay, they just wasn't cool enough. Well, let me tell you something, sir. Real recognize real represents those who live by a code recognize other principled people who live by a code and who actually are authentic, right?
Yeah.
And so I say to you, sir, real recognize real, and you're looking quite familiar. The thing that you just said about beginning in elementary school, this is why I love bringing on guests, and I've been looking for energies where I can have this synergy with, right, who have similar passion. And I say often, I said, we go through the formal schooling system, beginning with kindergarten, first grade, second grade, on through until we have go to 12th grade. And depending on how successfully we've completed each one of these levels, depends on how we pass. If we pass, so have we learned the information that is required on that level? And then eventually, if we learned enough, we make it through 12th grade, and then we have a graduation. And the very word graduation can be seen as a combination of the words gradual indoctrination, because you've been gradually indoctrinated into the American society and what to expect as an adult. But we do know that the schooling system is still operating under the industrial age rules of teaching people to be factory workers. And so critical thinking, substance abuse, mental wellness, and emotional intelligence, kids aren't taught that. And so because of this, we got to hope that after the suffering comes in, that they come in and take advantage of it, because that pain then stirs people to seeking an answer of something that they always needed but never really knew. And so anyway, I say that to say that I believe that from kindergarten, from preschool, we should be teaching people about mental health and mental wellness, as well as substance abuse.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it should be reinforced every year all the way through high school.
All the way.
It's not something you do in assembly, once a year. It needs to be incorporated within the curriculum and reinforced and expanded every single year through high school.
And apparently some courses aren't working. Like, I don't know if they still do civics, but with less than 50% of people voting in the United States population, I think either that has to be grossly revamped or completely eradicated altogether. I mean, just send everybody some pamphlets and let them choose, Yeah. But we have to be intentional about what the future generations and the current generations, the information that we have access to, like letting people know that there is this information is there, and then making it damn near impossible for people to get past without knowing that it's there. Yeah, and the best way to do that is through the formal education system.
I agree. That's absolutely right.
All right, sir. Is there any other advice? I mean, you've been dropping jewels all day, man. I'm gonna have to, just send me the bill, and I will make sure that I will send you at least half of it. At least half of it, I will send you.
You send me half the bill. Hey, that's better than nothing. That's better than nothing. I would say.
That so?
I would say, and this is probably the subject for an entire session, but parents do need to be concerned about what's out there on the street. As I was sharing with you before we got going here, there's been a tremendous surge in vaping among adolescents, and parents need to know about that. And 3 years ago, for example, the percentage of high school seniors that were vaping marijuana was 9%. Today, it's 22%.
Mm,
The percentage that were vaping nicotine 3 years ago was 18%. It's 34% now.
mm.
So parents need to know about this stuff. They need to know about how available these drugs are. I think that would be shocking to a lot of parents on how easy it is for these kids to get drugs, and they know it. And how teenagers do not look at these drugs as being very harmful. When we ask high school seniors, how harmful is it for you to smoke marijuana regularly? Only 30% think it's harmful. So parents need to be aware of this stuff, not be paranoid about it, but just be educated and knowledgeable about it. So,
Yes.
so I thank you for helping me get that word out there.
No, thank you for your passion and continuing your work. Because all I know is you earned a retirement. All the stuff that I know that we didn't speak on that you've seen. Because again, our fields overlap, and that family unit is so central. When I was employed as a mental health clinician in the prison, working with the family also was responsibility of the social workers, as a profession. And that's also, I believe that if there's going to be changes in the mental health field, a therapists are grossly underpaid. Insurance company jerks therapists around to the
Yeah.
extent that they still have to, myself included, at times, or at times in the past, myself included, have to work and see an exhausting amount of sessions in order just to make ends meet, because the rates are negotiated so far down and insurance companies won't pay out. And there's the issues of actually contacting payments that you don't get. And then there's the environmental impact of being a therapist and being in the trenches, like being in that environment. I'm not talking about just prison. I'm talking about, just general. You saw, you said yourself, the frustration that some of these therapists, these social workers would exhibit after dealing with some of these families. We had to make the phone calls when people die at the prison. There's usually a social worker that speaks to the family in the hospital if someone ODs or dies from something. And so I want y'all to understand the immense work that social workers do in this country. I know when I was younger, I thought social workers, all they did was like snatch people's children up. But now that I'm a social worker, I understand that no, we don't do that at all. Like, I mean, well, there's of course, children and protective services, of course, CPS,
Yeah.
children protective services. And so, yes, they address that. But the field of social work is so wide, and we can fit in pretty much anywhere. Military, combat,
Hmm.
need
Hmm.
therapists, PTSD treatment.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say to those help workers out there, I know me and you we're dialoguing, but I want to say to them that we need to start advocating for ourselves too. We need better pay, we need better treatment, especially if we're going to be given the trench work. If they're going to give us, if every single institution we go into is going to give us the responsibility of calling families and talking to people when people are dead or have died, time and time and time again, knowing what that does to the human psyche, we deserve
Mhm.
better treatment too. And so, what changes I would like to see in the mental health field is that we be treated better as helpers.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Very well said.
So, is there anything else you would like to say to the people before we leave, sir?
No, I think I hope they learned a lot from our conversation, from your input and my input, and I would just encourage every parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, family member who's out there listening that this is a topic that I don't want you to become paranoid about. I don't want you to become afraid of, but I don't want you to avoid either. Knowledge is power, like I said early. Learn as much as you can. Feel empowered that if you are in this situation that you can deal with it, or if you have a friend or a relative who's struggling with it, you can be a good resource for them too. So yes, I'd like everybody to buy my book, but more importantly, I want people to learn about this, be educated about it, and feel confident and hopeful hopeful that if they're in this situation, they and their family can get through it.
Again, I say, sir, real recognizes real, and you are looking quite familiar. Thank you so much, sir, for your service, for your passion, and for your message, and for putting in the labor to produce this book, because people will see the book, but they don't see the labor that went into it and the experience and the tears. And so please, if you're going to support, there's a lot of information out there in the mental health field, especially regarding substance abuse. But if you're going to support any individual, if you're trying to figure out who should I go to get this information, go with the people that have done the trench work, that have poured out sweat, blood, and tears to get this information, this knowledge. Not only knowledge, but knowledge through experience. You can tell industry folk versus real folk. And my brother right here, Mr. Capriola, is definitely real. So thank you, sir, for being unapologetically authentic. I don't know if I told you my mission statement is to assist others in developing the audacity to live unapologetically authentic. But your audaciousness is clearly present all the way from high school on through now. So, sir, I just say I salute you, and I tell you to stay lit, but stay lit in a healthy way. I meant live in truth. So I don't know if I told you about that. My saying is to stay lit. A, because it's cool, and then B, because
it is cool. I give you that, Harry. It's cool. I gotta say, you throw out those gems every once in a while that just boggle the mind.
but B, because it means live in truth, living in truth, living in your truth. So audacity is about living. Being authentic is about living a values-based life. What I want to say is that even though you can't be with your child every moment of every day, the best thing that you can give your child, the best way you can arm and protect your children is with the truth. In the flu, I know this may get your emotions of maybe COVID and the pandemic out of this when I say this, but for the flu, they inject the three strands they predict to be the most prominent for the season. When you get the flu shot, they inject you, from my understanding, unless they change the protocol. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm speaking as a layperson, but they inject you with strands of the virus, right? And so that just a little bit of it, so that your body begins to build up the antibodies, because it recognizes it when it's a full-on assault, when it was not intentional. So when you actually come in contact with that flu virus, your body can recognize it and remember how it defeated it the first time when it was injected, and then do it again and replicate that activity. The best thing that you can do to arm your kids is to give them the truth.